Hello guys, my name is Yashas and I'm going to be your tutor for this course of microeconomics. So in this course, I'm going to have 10 or about 10 units covering everything you need to know for this microeconomics course. And I'm a part of the ECDE Foundation, which is basically where we believe every child deserves an education. And in this first episode, it's basically an introduction where we talk about the basic fundamentals of economics. But firstly, what is economics? So, economics is the study of how people, firms, and societies use their scarce productive resources to best satisfy their unlimited material wants. So, you might have not understood what I just said perfectly. So, let me give you a few examples. So these resources or factors of production are commonly separated into four groups. Labor, which is basically human effort and talent, which could be both physical and mental. Land or natural resources, which is basically any resource created by nature. Physical capital, which is all the man-made equipment like machinery, but also buildings, roads, vehicles, and computers. And the last thing is entrepreneurial ability, which is the effort and know-how to put all the other resources together in a productive venture. Another major part of economics is scarcity. Scarce or limited in supply is basically when productive resources are hard to find or low in supply. Since productive resources are scarce, it makes sense that the production of goods and services must be scarce. Here's an example. Sometimes it is easier to see this if you look at the production of something familiar, like the production of a midterm paper. First thing you need is labor. You have your hours of research, writing, and rewriting. As well, as we all know, these hours are scarce or limited to the number of walking hours in a day. Land or natural resources. That comes from papers, comes from trees. Electricity, which comes from rivers, coal, natural gas, wind, or solar. Not only are these scarce in supply, but your ability to acquire these resources is limited by your income, which is a result of using some of your scarce labor hours to work for a wage. Capital, your computer, printer desk, pens, pencils, the library, and the sources within it. And the entrepreneurial ability is the skills it takes to compile the research into a coherent, thoughtful, and articulate piece of academic work. Now, let's talk about trade-offs. The fact that we are faced with scarce resources implies that individuals, firms, and governments are constantly faced with trade-offs. Let's talk about the individual, what the trade-offs individuals face. Consumers choose between housing arrangements, like do I rent an apartment or buy a house? Transportation options, grocery store items, and many other daily purchases. Workers and students must choose between a wide range of employment opportunities. Do I pick up an extra shift? Do I pursue my MBA or my PhD? Now, let's talk about firms. For the firms, decisions are often centered upon which good or service can be provided, how much should be produced, and how to go about producing those goods and services. A local restaurant considers whether or not to stay open later on Saturday night. A steel company must decide whether to open a steel plant in Indiana or Indonesia. And lastly, the governments. Every society in one form or another places many tough decisions in the hand of the government, both local and national. Not surprisingly, local government is faced with the issues that are likely to have an immediate impact on the lives of local citizens. Should we use tax revenues or pave the potholes in the street or buy a new city bus? At the national level, not all citizens would feel the impact immediately, but the stakes are likely much higher. For example, should we open protected wilderness areas to oil and gas exploration? Should we impose a tariff on imported rice? Regardless of the decision maker, individual, firm, or government, The realities of scarce resources creates a trade-off between the opportunity that is taken and the opportunity that was not taken and thus foregone. The value of what was given up is called the opportunity cost. Now, at the most basic level, the opportunity cost of doing something is what you sacrifice to do it. In other words, if you can use a scarce resource to pursue activity X, the opportunity cost of activity X is activity Y, the next best use of that resource. If that didn't make sense, here's an example. You have one scarce hour to spend between studying for an exam or working at a coffee shop for $6 an hour. If you study, the opportunity cost is $6. Another one. You have one scarce hour between studying for an exam or working at a coffee shop for $8 per hour or mowing your uncle's lawn for $10 an hour. If you choose to study, what is the opportunity cost of studying? Think about this for a second. The opportunity cost of using your resource to do activity X is the value resource would have in its next best alternative use. Therefore, the opportunity cost of studying is $10, the better of your two alternatives. Now, let's go into marginal analysis and production possibilities. So, marginal analysis is the concept seen throughout economics, and we cover it through this course, but let's briefly look at it from a consumer's point of view. Marginal cost, or MC. That is basically the additional cost incurred from the consumption of the next unit of a good or service. If you don't understand what I'm saying, I will give you an example in just a sec. Another part of marginal analysis is the marginal benefit, which is the additional benefit received from the consumption of the next unit of a good or service. So here's the example. The soda machine down the hall charges me $1 for every can of pop. The decision to buy another soda is another example of marginal analysis. If I expected to receive at least $1 in additional benefit, buying another soda is a rational decision. So, how many sodas will I consume in a typical day? For each of the three sodas, my MB, which is my marginal benefit, is greater than $1. The marginal cost of the next soda. The fourth soda provides me with exactly $1 in marginal benefit. So I find it exactly worth my while to buy it. The fifth soda is not bought because marginal cost is greater than marginal benefit. Notice that my marginal benefit declines as I consume more sodas. This is a fairly predictable relationship, since I'm likely to enjoy my first soda of the day more than my fifth. Don't worry, if you do not understand this perfectly, I will go into this in a lot more depth over the course. And when I get to it, I will go over it again. Now, let's talk about some production possibilities. So, let's talk about to examine production and opportunity costs. Economists find it useful to create a simplified model of an individual or a nation that can choose to allocate its scarce resources between production of two goods or services. For now, we assume that those resources are being fully employed and used efficiently. Now, you might have no idea what I just said, so here's an example. Think about it this way. The owner of a small bakery can allocate a fixed amount of labor, the chef and her helpers, capital, mixers, pans, and ovens, natural resources, raw materials, and her entrepreneurial talent toward the production of pastries and pizza crusts. So, now, if the chef wishes to produce one pastry, she must give up two pizza crusts. If she wishes to produce one more crust, then she must give up one half of pastry. You see how that works? So now, let's talk about law of increasing cost and comparative advantage and comparative advantage and specialization. So the law of increasing cost tells us that the more of a good is produced, the greater its opportunity cost. The concepts of specialization and comparative advantage describe the way that individuals, nations, and societies can acquire more goods at lower cost. Now, here's another example. Suppose our bakery, which can produce both pizza crust and pastry, shares the local market with a pizza parlor. The pizza parlor can also produce pastries, but it might rather produce pizza crusts. Each firm would like to produce more goods at lower cost. Because the bakery can produce more pastries than the pizza parlor, the bakery has the absolute advantage in the pastry production. Now, let's go over efficiency. There are only two types of efficiency: productive efficiency and allocative efficiency. The economy is producing the maximum output for a given level of technology and resources. All points on the production frontier are productively efficient. And allocative efficiency is basically when the economy is producing the optimal mix of goods and services. By optimal, we mean that it is the combination of goods and services that provides the best net benefit to society. If society is allocatively efficient, it is operating at the best point of the frontier. So this is the basic fundamentals I think we should know. I know I did not go in really deep into this, but don't worry about that. If you didn't understand, don't worry about that. I will go over the next couple of episodes. These topics will be covered way more in depth, and I will see you guys in the next video.